Talk to me, Jason, about the focus now in the Intel community, whether analysts, linguists, data, and is it the objective to replace intelligence analysts and operators in some way or augment it?
Focus is definitely on augmenting. I think we're a long way from replacing human analysts. So really the goal is to reduce the amount of data that an analyst needs to look at in order to make a judgment. And one of those steps to data reduction is to be constantly scouring sort of the data environment for signs that might be important, and then kind of perform like analytic triage for the analyst so that you present the things that are sort of balanced. This could be important or it might not be important, tee it up. To give one example, we have a program called Open Source Indicators that looked at many different kinds of unclassified data for indicators of disease outbreaks. And one of the real challenges for detecting outbreaks overseas is medical reporting isn't very good. It's spotty. So we were looking for ways of detecting earlier whether there was a hemorrhagic fever outbreak, like Ebola. And some of the early indicators are people staying at home rather than going to work and back. So absenteeism. One way to detect absenteeism is if mobile phones stay at home rather than going to work and back. And you don't need personal level data, you just need like population level data of phones staying in one place during a workday. But you could also look at whether there was an increase in crowding at certain pharmacies or health clinics from commercial overhead imagery. You could look at whether there was increased web search queries for symptoms for people trying to understand what they might be suffering from, or from social media messages that were posting their symptoms. The volume of data that was involved in making those kinds of judgments was, trillions of bits. Too much for any human analyst to inspect. So we trained systems that could automatically look through these data. We trained them on historical disease outbreaks in order to identify those patterns of behavior that indicated whether an outbreak was taking place. And we could then get outbreak detection that happened weeks faster than traditional medical surveillance. So that's the kind of problem that I think machine learning is really well suited for, is taking the ocean of data and bringing it down into something about the size of a kiddie pool that an analyst can make sense of, actually really dig down into in order to understand whether there's a real event happening or whether this is an artifact from noisy data.
What are the areas that the Intel community itself is most interested in gaining the leverage and the assistance of AI-enabled tools?
I think imagery. So we have a program called Finder, that takes an image that might be from, say, a cell phone camera or from a ground-based camera, and even if that image is not natively geotagged by like a GPS with a latitude or longitude, the system automatically detects where on Earth the picture was taken just by looking at features like the skyline, the architectural features, geologic features, botanical features. So automated geolocation in a way that would be impossible for human analysts to look at a picture of, a random spot in Afghanistan and figure out where that was taken. Mm-hmm. And that's led to some really important operational successes. Another example is machine translation and speech recognition in any language. So most of the big internet companies that invest in machine translation or speech to text are really interested in languages where there are lots of consumers, right? Because that's where the market is. In intelligence, we have to worry about all those other languages too. So we have a program called Babel and one called Material that work on speech recognition and machine translation for any language, and bringing training time down to a week from probably about 9 to 12 months was the norm before this program. So getting about a 2 order of magnitude improvement in performance. And that's because there are these highly conserved features of language that we can use to train models. A fourth one I would say is being able to infer from imagery what the function of a building is from satellites. So can you tell whether a particular building is a bomb factory or an automotive plant? Can you label the features of the world in ways that are useful to intelligence analysts. Impossible to do manually just because there are so many buildings on Earth. And being able to monitor those patterns of activity that can tell you whether something is a weapons plant or not is too subtle, really, for a human analyst to keep eyeballs on all the time.